There's some amazing businesses and amazing startups, and I think that's really, really exciting. Are they businesses that are going to save the ocean? Unlikely. I go back to what I believe needs to be done, which is to transition this existing industry, and that's where these new innovative businesses can come in, because if you plug them into the existing industry, then they can have a catalytic impact.
The blue economy is growing fast. It's expected to reach $3 trillion by 2030. And if you're an ocean founder, you may be wondering, where is that growth happening? How do I tap into that potential and contribute to positive change? Gorell Barnes from Ocean 14 Capital thinks that the biggest opportunity to drive growth is to transition the established and proven businesses to become more modern, more digitalized and sustainable. Plug innovation into what already exists rather than trying to build something new from scratch. I'm Fed the Gobby, and this is another episode of The Ocean Age, the podcast for entrepreneurs and innovators in the blue economy. Here it goes. Chris, well, welcome to the show on this unusual venue with a whale on the ceiling and some weird noises.
Feels like we're underwater.
They're very much so. For people that don't know you and don't know Ocean 14, who are you, and what is the company about? What's your mission?
For me, it's good to be in Montreal for the Economist World Ocean Summit in a building with a whale on the ceiling.
Yeah.
I'm a co-founder of Ocean 14 Capital. Ocean 14 Capital is a fund that invests in the blue economy. So the 14 is for SDG 14. So the fund is focused on investing in the existing blue economy industry, wanting to drive capital into existing businesses to help those businesses grow and prosper, and at the same time drive the convergence to get those businesses to be more impactful businesses. And everything is driven to make sure that those businesses are making money and make sure those businesses are having a positive impact on SDG 14, which is life below water. So the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal of number 14. Ocean 14 Capital was started about 5 years ago now.
And what sort of companies do you normally work with?
So the fund at the moment has about 16 investments, and they range, they're under the sort of the two thematics of the fund, which is food security. Mm-hmm. So the fund invests in aquaculture and the ecosystem around aquaculture, and fisheries and the ecosystem around that, and alternative protein. So how do you feed fish alternatives to wild fish? And then the other thematic is marine ecosystems, so seaweed and sort of marine natural capital and plastics pollution. An example of some of the companies that the fund's invested in is a company called Kingfish. Here's the whale again.
Yeah, that's when it gets loud.
Which is a recircular aquaculture system. So that's a technology that enables the farming of fish on land. And that company is one of the leaders in RAS, and it farms yellowtail, which is a premium fish that's served in a lot of high-end sushi restaurants. And then the fund does a lot of investments in genetics, so in shrimp genetics. How do you enable the efficiencies in shrimp farming to really make shrimp farming more sustainable, more regenerative, and of course, therefore more impactful?
I bet you are exposed to a lot of founders, a lot of startups out there. What do you see as the biggest mistakes that founders make in this space?
Well, just for clarification, the fund invests primarily in growth stage businesses. It doesn't invest in startup businesses. It invests in businesses that have been around, more established, and are looking for growth capital. Right. So the fund believes that the real sort of missing part of the blue economy is that later stage capital. There's a lot of sort of venture, seed, startup capital, but there's much less in terms in the growth area. And that's where the fund sees the biggest opportunity to drive growth and change. There needs to be, for us to ensure, and we're all here to have a healthy ocean, for us to have that, we need to transition an existing economy. So the blue economy is something that's been around for thousands of years. It's big, chunky industries of fishing, of aquaculture, of shipping, of tourism, and that needs transition. So that needs capital to turn these industries and these businesses, a lot of them which are SMEs, small, medium enterprises, to become more sustainable.
There's a need for transitioning. When you talk about transitioning, is transitioning to a maybe old-fashioned, a bit archaic, maybe mindset or a way of operating into something that is a bit more sustainable. Is that the transition?
I think the transition is taking existing industry. So let's take fish farming, for example, something that's been around for a long, long time, where you've got well-established businesses with, great owners, great founders, good management teams that's still running these businesses on Excel spreadsheets. So a transition there would be, how would you drive digitization, circularity of those businesses, how you'd help those businesses improve, all elements of the businesses, whether it's back office, front office, sales, marketing, and then of course the operations. So there's a lot of brilliant tools in, whether it's AI or digitization of fish farms, whether it's disease prediction, it's automatic feeders, it's better ways of sales and distribution of the fish, it's making sure that you're using the entire fish, not just, for human consumption, but all other elements of that fish that can be sold for pet or for health products or other areas. So driving circularity, utilizing, all the tools that probably are a bit further ahead on land-based businesses into the blue economy. And that's what we see as the transition. And I think what the fund certainly sees is that it's exciting is this convergence where the business, you grow these businesses and you drive these businesses, and as they grow, they can have more impact.
Right. Two things come to mind. Maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong. What drives this may be twofold. One hand, I'm thinking a lot of the newer, sexier, more exciting startups are a much bigger risk for a fund like yours potentially. And the other thing is it a demand element? As in, that's where you see a need, a demand for innovation and modernization in the ocean economy. And that's where the money is, I suppose.
I think that it's brilliant, and certainly I like to encourage entrepreneurs who are looking at innovations and building businesses that are going to have a positive impact on the ocean. And there certainly is, there's some amazing businesses and amazing startups, and
some of which we've seen here.
And I think that's really, really exciting. Are they businesses that are going to save the ocean? Unlikely. I go back to what, I believe needs to be done, which is to transition this existing industry. And that's where these new innovative businesses can come in, because if you plug them into the existing industry, then they can have a catalytic impact. So, for example, plugging technology into fish farms, that can have a huge impact on all of the efficiencies, the sustainability, and the economic benefits for those fish farms. So I think it's exciting. There's a lot of opportunity there. But back to where's the money? I think the money is moving away from early stage. I think there is an element of venture fatigue. I think there's been quite a lot of capital destruction in climate, in oceans, early stage, and it's moving more towards growth equity, because it is slightly more de-risked, because you're looking at businesses that have, cash flow, making money. It's less risk, they're established.
A proven model.
And the growth trajectory is more certain than the early stage businesses. And a lot of LPs moving in that direction too.
But that doesn't mean that new businesses, new startups can't, like you said earlier, be plugged into existing businesses. Is that how you operate, or do you always work directly with the more established businesses, or do you facilitate those newer companies coming in? How does that? I'm just trying to get my head around, from the point of view of somebody listening, there's like an early stage founder, and they're like, okay, how how do I approach this,
As a firm, Ocean 14 Capital is, wants to encourage and support entrepreneurs and businesses throughout the blue economy. I'd say if those businesses are looking for startup capital, then Ocean 14 Capital is not the place to go. But, if they have great innovations or technologies that you can clearly see that there's a synergy and a benefit to the portfolio companies that Ocean 14 Capital has invested in, then absolutely it's open for collaboration to see how there may be a partnership that could be mutually beneficial.
So if you were an early stage founder, you would look at partnerships with established businesses that may need some modernization and may need some innovation within their processes.
I would encourage founders in this space to be looking at how that their technologies or innovation can benefit the existing industry. And you're seeing that if you look at shipping, for example, there's a lot of startups, early stage companies that are looking at how do they drive the decarbonization of shipping? How can they create new ways for ships to be more efficient in their routing, more efficient in the logistics of what they transport? And that, of course, is you want to work with the existing industry. So, I think you look at any existing industry, you want your business to ideally either completely take over something that isn't working very well or enable something that is working to work much better and much smarter.
Yeah. What do you find as the biggest misconception in your area of work?
I think that I'm not sure if it's a misconception, but I think it's still a lack of understanding of how vital the ocean is for the entire livelihoods and for humanity's survival. So I think that it's still been misunderstood and overlooked how vital the oceans is for defense, security, food security, the entire planetary operating system, for the oxygen we breathe, or the carbon that we produce. The entire planet is effectively run by the ocean, and it still is rare to find people outside our small ocean community that really understand that. And I think it's really important. And it is good to see that the blue economy is getting more traction, more awareness in Davos, at UNGA, at COP. But, we need more, and we need more capital to go into this, and we need more attention to make sure that we do have a chance of regenerating the ocean. Because if we don't, then, we're in big trouble.
Yeah. There is something that keeps coming up is that the ocean economy is underfunded, particularly that 14 element.
Yeah.
Gets, I can't remember what the numbers are, but it's much smaller slice of the pie compared to the others. Why do you think that is?
Why is, if you look at the 17 SDGs, why is 14 the least funded? It goes back to, and as you've got to ask the question with the fact that the blue economy is, $3 trillion economy and growing, which is equivalent to the 7th largest country's GDP. So it's massive. Why is this underfunded? Yeah. Because I think, back to my point, awareness and understanding, why is this important? A lot of money going into climate solutions or climate tech. Well, the best defense and solution we have to solving the climate is to make sure we have a healthy ocean. So why isn't billions of dollars being plowed into making sure that we can protect and restore the ocean? Because that's our best line of defense. So I think it's a misunderstanding, it's a lack of awareness, but also it's a lack of deal flow. There's just not that many businesses that are big enough to attract a lot of the bigger funds that want to go into the space. And there's no fund two, there's one or two fund twos in private equity and venture within the ocean space. And a lot of institutional money doesn't go into fund one. So it's relatively new, the investing into the blue economy, and it's growing.
Do you feel it's a case of there aren't enough businesses that are established that have that proven business model? Or is it more that they're not set up properly, they're not ready to be invested on? Where is the gap in your mind?
I think, well, there's a huge amount of SMEs that, doing good businesses that are making money. That's certainly where Ocean 14 Capital looks to play, which is that's what the fund sees as the huge opportunity to actually be able to make money and have a positive impact on the ocean. And I think more investors are now looking into that space.
So it's maybe more a case of a lack of awareness that these businesses
Yeah.
exist and that
And
there's
it's,
a potential.
and investing in water is quite tricky. It's quite challenging. It requires, a very strong team. It requires access. It requires deep knowledge of the industry and an ability to execute. There's a lot of mistakes are made by non-educated investors in fish farming or in fisheries or in all elements of the blue economy.
What would be an example of those mistakes?
Well, I think you've seen a huge amount of capital destroyed in insect protein. So it was a big company, Y Insect, I think 500 million was invested into that business. And I think that the mistake was made to try and grow insects in Europe, where you need a huge amount of energy to get the right climate to grow the insects. Ocean 14 Capital saw that challenge and decided to invest in a company called Entos, which was based its first plant in Colombia, because you've got the tropical climate. So therefore your energy costs are massively reduced. But that will be the most cost-effective plant, creating the most cost-efficient black soldier flies. So I think that's a big learning. Yeah. I think there's been a huge amount of, I wouldn't say errors, but money spent and potentially wasted in RAS, recircular agriculture systems. So there's been some big businesses that have gone under in that by spending a huge amount of money and a lot of capex on building out RAS farms.
What happened?
It's expensive. Things can go wrong. Farming seems easy, but it's quite difficult. Disease, the water's not right, the systems aren't right, the temperature, the energy, the sales, marketing, the amount of land you need. Yeah. It's quite complex.
Do you think the seaweed space has made similar mistakes?
I don't think seaweed industry has made mistakes. I think the seaweed industry has got a lot of hype and excitement, and I think a lot of people want it to work, and it's kind of been catapulted by seaweed t-shirts or seaweed bricks or seaweed shoes, whereas in fact what the really exciting thing about seaweed is, how it can be used in biostimulants for agriculture to make, fields more efficient, how it can go into animal feed. And those are the really, I think, exciting areas for it. But I think that there isn't yet, it's a very fragmented market. So there's a lot of small sort of artisanal producers. Yep. There isn't really the big industrial scale yet. And Ocean 14 Capital believes that's what needs to happen. Whether it's a roll up of all these small players or it needs to be, that we need to find the big scalable industry, because otherwise it's very difficult to make money.
What about bio-ingredients and biorefinery using seaweed? Do you see potential in that? And is there any interesting players, or is it too early days?
There's, yes, absolutely. You need to have both the supply of the seaweed and then you need to have the refinery to actually then produce the ingredients that you need, which is, the biostimulants, or, arguably the big prize is in, farmer grade ingredients, which is then you need a real particular refinery in order to get that, food grade, farmer grade product. And there's very few. There was a company in France called Algaia, but are
they not around anymore?
They're still around, yeah. But I don't know any other ones.
I think in the UK we had Oceanium and Biomara.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are the ones that come to mind.
Yeah.
How do you think about risk as, I suppose, a big part in the decision making when you approach a business? What's your approach?
When the fund looks at businesses, there's a lot of very smart people that analyze businesses, really look at what the risk is, what's the downside protection that you can create in any structures that you're going to be putting into that investment, really questioning management cases, creating your own forecasts of that business, looking at how you can actually make sure that you're protecting your capital when you invest, whether that's using convertible loans or other ways of making sure that you have the best protection for your money. But all investments are risky, aren't they? You just got to mitigate it as much as possible. I think, making sure that you're confident in the team, making sure there's the right team, the right leadership. I think you see a lot of challenges with sales in the blue economy. So, how are you making sure that the business really has a good sales function? Not very good at sales and marketing.
Right, exactly, yeah.
Selling fish, selling seaweed, it's really important. We always look at that. How's the sales and distribution of the product gonna work? How's the business gonna scale? Making sure the team is incentivized.
What is the gap there? Is it a case of those businesses predominantly technical and they don't have the knowledge or the right people? Or what's missing in your mind around sales?
I think a lot of the businesses are focused on farming operations, commodity in creating the fish, for example, but not so great at how do you sell it. You might be able to beautifully farm wonderful, organic, sustainable sea bass, but actually selling that, distributing that to B2B, B2C is often the challenge. And so making sure that the businesses are good at selling is important to us. Because you haven't got any sales, you've got no business, have you? All very well and good, but without sales and marketing, it's quite tricky.
Yeah, I've been coming across that so frequently. Especially, I think I see it a lot in early stage when you have, technical founders that have a scientific engineering type background and they fall in love with the solution. They fall in love with having a positive impact and making a real difference, and they get started, and the sales and marketing is almost like a dirty word. And
it's funny that people see sales as something. I mean, I do a lot of sales.
Yeah.
People see that as something that's dirty when in fact it's pretty much the engine of all businesses, right?
Well, you'd agree that that's the mentality sometimes, isn't it?
But I think in every industry.
Really?
Yeah.
And the antidote to that is to bring in the right people or train the existing ones?
Well, I think, help make sure you're putting in the right tools. There's a lot of great tools now, but making sure you've got the right people to do it. You need to have, really good sales team, really good commercial people that are really driven. You can have a CEO with a great vision. I mean, I think CEOs should be sales, but actually making sure that you've got a good team that is selling as well, motivated and driven to drive the results.
When you consider a business to invest on, what are the metrics that you look at, and what is the weight of these metrics? Like, something that comes to mind is, for example, the potential for a return, a financial return. Another one could be the potential for impact. I'd be curious to understand, what are the things that you look at, and in what sort of percentage isn't going to work. But you know what I mean? Like, what are the most important things that you look at, and maybe let's try to quantify it.
So the fund is there to deliver a return for its investors. So, the fund will always look and model a investment case to ensure that it can achieve that return for its LPs. But it is an impact fund, and therefore it has to return and deliver an impact. So every business, there'll be a deep analysis of what's the impact that the business needs to deliver to have a impact on the ocean. And if the business can't deliver a positive impact on the ocean, if it's neutral, then it could be an investable case. But if it's negative, it won't be invested in. So it has to be able to deliver both financial returns and impact returns.
So, from your point of view, what is something that you come across in your day-to-day that you feel is really important, but maybe doesn't get a lot of attention, or that we've missed in this conversation?
I think I'll go back to the point of, making sure that those people and industries that are influential really understand why the ocean is important. I had lunch with Peter Thompson today, who's the UN Special Envoy of the Ocean, who's doing an incredible job. And, we talked about how do we make sure that at these kind of events, that there are always people that are not in the ocean space learning and becoming an ocean hero and an ocean champion, because we need industries that are not in the ocean understanding why the ocean's health is important to their industry. We need new money that's not necessarily investing in the oceans to be here. So I think, making sure that we're making the right noises like the whales to encourage and drive more money, more influence on protecting and restoring the ocean. Because, I say it again, if we don't have a healthy ocean, we're screwed. Yeah. So it's so important.
there's also a risk of staying in our own bubble and preaching to the converted all the time, and and agree with each other, and then
Yeah,
and there's no new
agree.
perspective coming in.
yeah.
Do you find that, sort of linking back to what we were talking about earlier, and the metrics and the things you consider, do you find there's a lack of data for funds like yours to make decisions around the risk, around the impact, or you feel that you have all the information you need most of the times?
I think, well, Ocean 14 Capital certainly creates its own data and analysis, and it uses a lot of the tools that are out there. I think when you look at the ocean from a wider perspective, one of the challenges but the opportunities is that there isn't enough data of what's happening in the ocean. So there's a lot of focus on actually how do you collect that data, what needs to be in the ocean to digitize and make sure that we have the same information that we have in the ocean on the land. And that's it's a good opportunity for investing, but also it's a vital opportunity for the protection and the restoration of the ocean.
Absolutely. Do you have any final thought before we bring this to a close? Any sort of final message, call to action, or anything like that?
Just to say, if you're the audience that you're talking to, founders who are thinking about what to do, or they're building a business, or they want to do something important, that really do go for it within creating solutions for the ocean and for the climate. Looking at, it's a massive opportunity and it's really important. You couldn't be doing anything more important than wanting to help restore and protect the ocean. And there's great business opportunities in all the areas: transport, shipping, ports, food. Blue Foods is completely underrated as vital for food security. So we need, a lot more smart people thinking about, how they can make a big difference in this space.
And I think, from what I can see, there's no lack of energetic, well-intentioned people that want to come in, that want to bring new ideas and develop new solutions. What I maybe see sometimes is that there is a bit of a wasted human potential, where people put a lot of effort into solutions that never see the light of day, or that unfortunately get lost. And I wonder if, in your experience, is any advice that comes to mind, or any principle that could help people avoid building something that nobody wants, or wasting a lot of time and human capital, because it's such a sad thing to see,
Do your homework first. Make sure there's a good business case.
Simple as that.
Yeah.
Simple as that. Thank you so much.
All
Thank
right.
you for your time.
Cheers.